Yaj, also known as the relationship goddess, took a break from conducting ancient marital healing rituals so she could talk to us today at Cityline Family Restaurant. For 14 years, Yaj has been a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice. She has a BS in health education from Hunter College and a master's degree in family systems counseling from Bastyr University in Seattle. Yaj's topic today is excellent communication and how to have it in all relationships. She knows a great deal on this subject, having helped thousands of couples and individuals in her work. But also, the same communication principles she teaches to her clients helped her discover that her own marriage was a fundamental mismatch. Still using good communication tools in that relationship, she is now a happily separated, cooperative co-parent and a reinvented businesswoman, marriage therapist, divorce midwife, and motivational speaker. After Yaj speaks, she will be available to answer questions. So today, talking about From Clueless to Conscious, how communication makes or breaks any relationship, welcome Yaj.
Let's hear it for John Raquet. Thanks for that great intro, John.
You're welcome.
And for the fishbowl format here, so we can be transparent, literally, in our communication here today. As you heard John say, I teach people how to communicate because many people aren't doing it right. And this is a more common problem than you might think. And today we're going to go over a few basic steps you can take that can give you clarity and empower your communication anywhere. Communication breakdowns are anything that creates disconnection as opposed to connection between people. And this happens in all different kinds of relationships, personal and professional. But when we focus on the personal relationships, particularly those spousal, marital partnerships, we get really good material to work with. So that's what I'm going to do today, but the content of this talk applies to all relationships. Parenting, with our own parents, colleagues, clients, friends, and anywhere else you communicate. How many of you feel you have a relationship where you feel it's overwhelmingly difficult to handle sometimes? Or ever lose your cool, calm exterior, interior? Or how about feeling unseen, unheard, or not understood? Again, communication problems or anything that creates disconnection, not connection between people. And it happens to all of us in some place in our life. Many couples cite communication problems as motivation to divorce. And these ineffective communication problems happen in families and also affect the children. Child psychologists often specify bad communication in the family as factors with the children and adolescents they see that have depression and anxiety. And we know that these ineffective communication ways can extend beyond the family into the social setting, the schools, the workplace, and beyond. So why do we have communication problems? 2 reasons: lack of skill and emotional reactivity. I'm going to teach you some skills later on, so I want to talk about emotional reactivity because it's underneath almost all communication breakdowns. Except, and I was going to make this point anyway, if they're purely technical. But even then, sometimes emotions are at play. So emotional reactivity is about triggers. We all have buttons inside of us that get pushed by certain stimuli. And these buttons were formed a long time ago. Yes, in childhood. They're the origin of our defense mechanisms. And we each have a special, custom-made, individually designed emotional reactivity pattern. When emotional reactivity takes 2 forms: getting bigger and getting smaller. So getting bigger is attacking, yelling, criticizing, belittling, defending, and outwardly directed emotional or physical violence. Getting smaller is retreating, retracting, withdrawing, shutting down, disappearing, or inwardly directed emotional or physical violence, and passive aggression. Left to become a pattern, emotional reactivity wreaks havoc in any relationship. It causes a loss of ease and safety in the connection, and it can do permanent damage to the bond, let alone to the individuals involved. So now we know what emotional reactivity is, and that it's underneath most communication problems or breakdowns. So what are communication problems? I'm going to give you some examples. Misunderstandings, epidemic. You say something and the person hears it, takes it differently than how you meant it. Then there's usually an emotional reaction based on what they know you meant. This usually triggers an emotional reaction in you, and we're off to the races. A conflict has erupted, and it can get ugly. No problem solving, another example. This is where we see a disappearance of any willingness in a relationship to sit down and talk it out. No more listening to the wise words of John Lennon. We can work it out. We can work it out. Gone. This is where one person may try to work it out, to talk it out, but after being rejected or attacked too many times, may give up. We often see this leading to emotional distance, fear of talking to the other person, and maybe even intimidation, which is quite a toxic dynamic indeed. Another example of communication problems is chronic conflict. Lots of fighting, lots of reactivity, defending, attacking, counterattacking, and retreating until the next offense. You see that you bring out the worst in this person, and they're doing the same to you. It's hard to break the cycle of chronic negativity, and it can be very damaging. And then there's this thing called Coventry. Coventry is a place in England that got bombed very heavily in World War II, so that might have something to do with it. But there's a phrase, to send someone to Coventry. It's the silent treatment. This is freezing someone out and ignoring their existence for days, weeks, months. My mother said my father put her in Coventry for the entire summer before he left. I don't remember it. I was 3. I'm glad. Glad I don't remember it. So I could detail other examples of communication breakdowns, but the truth is they all boil down to triggers, emotional reactivity, and no problem solving. And left unidentified, unresolved, unrepaired in a relationship, it can certainly be the demise of the relationship and can also lead to a host of emotional and physical symptoms in one or both people. Misery, depression, anxiety, difficulty focusing, concentrating at work, job loss, financial problems, maybe even suicide. And yes, divorce. But after that list, divorce doesn't sound so bad, does it?
Taking questions now?
I am not taking questions, thank you. So, relationships are based on communication. And communication starts with the people you live with, or your pets, the UPS guy, how you answer the phone. There's no way around it. Communication starts in your day-to-day life. And that's the place to practice communication skills, and that will extend elsewhere into all areas of your life. Consider this. You ask your partner, your spouse, or someone to do something for you. They say yes, but they really wanted to say no. They didn't have the nerve. They didn't know they were allowed to say no. or they didn't believe they could without causing World War IV. So you go on about your merry day, clueless that this person is now harboring resentment towards you. Next thing you know, you're at the dinner table, and you say, "Honey, would you pass the salt?" And they say, in front of the kids, "It's always about you, you, you. When do I get to have something done for me?" Stunned silence. Damage to the safety zone in the home, the marital bond. Or this. You share something with a friend, something upsetting that happened between you and your mother. You didn't think to preface it with telling your friend that you're feeling vulnerable and you're not looking for advice and you just need to vent. You share your story and your friend says, "Well, what'd you expect? You know she's a difficult person. You've been telling me that for years. Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" You feel cut off, criticized, angry, and hurt. She's clueless. You decide not to share anything of personal import with this friend, and a distance grows. Next thing you know, a common acquaintance tells you that your friend's father died 3 months ago. Or this. An old client resurfaces that you haven't seen in a while, and they make an appointment to see you. You've raised your fees since the last time they've been in, but you don't mention it because it's an old-time client and you're grateful for their loyalty. You do have your new fee schedule posted by the coat rack, the sign-in desk, and the toilet paper roll, but they don't see it. They're clueless, or they're pretending to be. They thank you sincerely for your help. They pay you the old fee, and they leave. Next thing you know, they refer a friend. "I'm so glad I finally found someone I can afford. Kathy said your fee is the same as it was 2 years ago. That is so rare. Thank you for being so kind." Ugh! Now you have a reputation for being cheap. You're angry at yourself and your client, and you already resent the new client. And she's clueless. The examples abound. It's infinite, but it's all the same problem: poor communication. George Bernard Shaw, famous playwright, said, "The biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place." Quite astute. We think we're communicating, but quite often we're not. Now, some of you might be sitting here thinking, yeah, obviously this is needed in the world. There's a lot of dysfunctional families out there, and there's still war. No peace in the Middle East yet, but I'm evolved. I'm good. My marriage is fine. I don't need to learn anything new about communication. This may be so. But rare is the individual that has no one in their life that struggles in some way communicating with them. If you think this is you, I humbly challenge you to do a brave survey. Choose a few key people in your life and tell them you absolutely need an honest answer for a personal growth assignment you have. And ask them this question: where in communication with you do they feel any difficulty, frustration, or not feeling heard? If they're honest, you probably will get some feedback that will be very valuable to you on your personal growth path. We all have some communication breakdowns in our life, and we all can feel the pain of wondering, how did we get here? How did our communication get so bad? I understand. From working with couples for 14 years and working very hard in my own marriage, I've learned all the ways that communication can go wrong. But I've also discerned over these years and with all of this work that by following a reliable method, a lot can go right. I come from what used to be called a broken home. And although the term is now considered politically incorrect, the truth is It accurately explains how I felt my whole childhood. My parents divorced when I was 3.5, and I have no memory of them ever being in the same room or even speaking to each other, though I saw my father every Sunday for 13 years. They didn't talk. Zip. Zilch. Nada. I felt broken. How could the two people who created me hate each other so much that they can't even say hello? I determined back then that when I grew up, I wanted to help children of divorce like me, because I knew how they felt. I wanted to help them feel not broken. But when I was in graduate school, getting my master's degree in family systems counseling, I was introduced to imago relationship therapy, the work of Dr. Harville Hendricks and Dr. Helen LaKelly Hunt. And I was smitten. I loved how structured imago is, and it made me feel emboldened to take on any issue with any couple, including my own marriage. I decided I wanted to work with couples and help them feel less broken and help them do less damage to their children. Over the years, I've boiled down to a few basic steps that actually work. I have a little example. A couple that I've been working with recently came in with their relationship really on the rocks, as most of the couples do come in, but they have a strong love and a real commitment to try to see if they can make their relationship work. I introduced a format to them the other day that helps dissect a trigger and understand what's going on underneath. We used it successfully in session, and I gave them the handout to take home. A few days later, the woman in the couple called me, and she told me that that morning her partner called her very upset about something that had just happened at work. He was ranting. She didn't want to join the negative energy as she had done many times in the past, but she wanted to be supportive. The handout I had given her was right in front of her on the table. She brilliantly started using it to talk her partner through his upset and walk him through understanding what was bothering him underneath. She said that after just a few minutes of doing this, he shifted and he felt so much better. He was ready to go into his workday, not only not angry and upset anymore, but actually feeling positive. She also said that the work we've been doing is helping them so much that their relationship, which was very on the rocks, is now feeling very positive, and they're both feeling very hopeful about their future. She was filled with gratitude. But the reason this couple is doing so well after just a few sessions is because they're receptive to the formats I'm teaching them. They use them at home. It makes all the difference. If that were you, what would you do with a partner ranting and raving angrily on the phone? Would you have the courage, which is really just the willingness, to use a format, to introduce a structure with your angry partner? Don DeLillo, novelist, has this great quote. I slept for 4 years. I didn't study much of anything. I majored in something called communication arts. Well, I strive to teach communication arts in a way that's not only interesting, but fascinating, profound, warm, rich, fun even. I see my clients in a portion of my house that I've sectioned off with a bookshelf and wooden beads and Indian tapestries everywhere. My clients and I sit on purple meditation cushions on the floor. My office has to match my hair. And I burn incense and light candles and play sacred music ever so softly in the background. I don't skip anything to create a healing, safe ambiance. It's the Yaj pod, and magic happens in there. People experience what great communication actually feels like. They practice, they learn, they get heard. And they get these things because they follow the rules of the pod. Let's get into the pod, shall we? I have 3 steps that are very simple and are able to be mastered with a little practice. And they are P, for pinpoint your perceptions. O, operate on your opinions. D, dialogue or discretion. Let's start with P, pinpoint your perceptions. I know I said earlier that communication starts with the people you live with or your pets, but it really starts with yourself. So let's start at the very beginning. What do I really feel right now in this moment? When there is a stimulus, particularly one that is bothersome to you, it is very important before you try to communicate with anyone to get a hold of what you are actually experiencing, sensing, feeling. And I love the word perception or perceive because it means, thankyou.dictionary.com, things we take in through the senses and the mind, not just feelings, are immediate intuitive recognition and insight. It's what we discern and can be defined as a unified awareness taken in from sensory processes with a stimulus. So pinpoint your perceptions gives you a you are here arrow on the map of any moment in your life. And it's where we start. Are you willing to try this right now, real quick? Sure. Thank you. Real quick, just, you can close your eyes or not. Think of a situation in your life that involves a relationship that's bothersome to you. Any situation in any relationship that's bothersome to you. And I want you to pinpoint 2 words, feeling words, that capture your perceptions, what you're noticing in your body right now when you think about it. Just 2 words. And then make a statement with those 2 words in your mind to yourself. I feel sad and angry. I feel tight and heavy. That's all I'm asking you to do. Take 8 seconds. Good. You've named something. You've given yourself a pinpoint of your perceptions on this situation in your life. Now you can go somewhere, because now you know where you are. Another story from a client that illustrates the importance of pinpointing your perceptions before you take action, before you communicate, is a woman that's been seeing me also only recently. She's a very good student. She is suddenly facing the fact that she might want to separate from her husband, having woken up after a very long slumber of unconsciousness in the relationship. She's working very hard on not operating out of guilt. The other day, she was engaged in an activity that she was finding pleasing, and a text came in from her husband. She recognized, perceived in her body immediately that it was a manipulation, an old and familiar feeling for her. But she'd been willing to be invisible in her marriage for so long that she almost just said yes right away. But because she is such a good student, she stopped and she took a moment to pinpoint her perceptions. And she got what her body was telling her was no. And she did this right in the middle of Home Depot. So you can do this anywhere. She declined his offer and felt grateful that she followed her instincts and saw that had she said yes again when she really wanted to say no, she would have been filled with resentment toward her husband and toward herself. She even called herself a horrible person when she was recounting the story to me. She was so filled with guilt and self-criticism. Now, no was her body's truth, her feelings, her perceptions. I'm a horrible person for wanting to say no was her negative opinion of herself, her thoughts, which lead us right to the next step. O, operate on your opinions. So we've all heard the concept of you have to own your own stuff, yeah? Well, what does that mean? It means recognizing your triggers and your emotional reactivity. And your critical mind. So our thoughts happen in our minds, and opinions are negative, judgmental, or critical, usually, thoughts that are not based on sufficient evidence to be certain. But we buy into them like they are capital T truth, and it gets us in a lot of trouble. Thoughts are the main things that cause us to be emotionally triggered. It just happens so fast we don't notice it. If we slow the tape down enough and identify our perceptions and then the negative thoughts we're having, we can really go far in becoming conscious communicators. There's a couple that I see regularly, not so recently, that if I didn't give them rules, they would be interrupting each other all the time. The whole tenor of their communication is antsy, anxious, and disconnected. The other day, they were in the middle of a dialogue, and when one person was speaking, suddenly they said, "Ah, did you see what they just did?" I hadn't. I missed it. I asked what I had missed, and they said, "They just looked the other way. You see, I never get hurt, and they don't care about me." Now, presence is the main discipline in the Yajpad. But we practice. We mess up. We have less than conscious moments. But the reactivity, the opinion, we have to be careful what we're buying into in our minds. The way you do this step is to ask yourself, what is going on in my head? This is not about the body. You want to see the thoughts like a screensaver in your mind. What are those sentences, those conclusions, those beliefs, those declarative, I know this is true statements that you have about this situation? So let's try it right now. Working with the same situation you pinpointed your perceptions about. Go inside and make a silent mental incision into your minds and find the most blamey, victimy, big opinion you have about this situation and surgically remove it and put it on a stainless steel tray and hold it up in the cold light. Just do this silently with yourself. This is the hardest step. See if you can pinpoint that one big opinion. Just hold it there. Look at it. And just notice how this is for you. Just notice. Excellent. After you do these two steps, then you might be ready to talk to somebody. And we go to D for dialogue or discretion. Now, to communicate or not to communicate, that is the question. There are times when not communicating with the person involved in your situation is the right thing to do. It depends. We learn to make that discernment. But if you decide to use discretion and not communicate with that person, I recommend that you document. I milked a lot out of this acronym. D, document for yourself. Journal, write it out someplace privately so at least you're expressing yourself. Or you may choose to dialogue with a different person, a safe and supportive person like a therapist, a friend, a healer, so you can express yourself. But we're going to focus on the times that you choose to dialogue with the person involved in the situation. I'm going to zip right to it. We're going to quickly practice D for ditto. This was very handy. In Imago dialogue, we say mirroring, but this is the pod method, not the palm method, so it's D for ditto. I want you to actually quickly turn to the person next to you. Boom, boom. There'll be one person without a partner, that's okay. This has to happen lickety-split. So if you're willing to do it, turn to the person next to you. Al, you'll just hang out. Just going to do this real fast. And ask them if they're willing to ditto you. Actually, no, I want to keep, yeah, why don't you guys go, and you guys, yeah. Al, you can hang in there. Because yeah. So, and I want you to just decide who's going to send and who's going to receive. Just real quick, who's going to send, who's going to receive. Okay, good. And what you're going to share is just like this tiniest little smidgen of imago dialogue that we could possibly do. No discussion. All you're going to do is share the sentence you created in your head, not the thought. We're not going there. Just, I feel sad and angry. I feel angry and frustrated. Whatever your sentence is, and the other person's going to give a copy back, like a ditto machine. So if it's I feel sad and angry, the receiver says, you feel sad and angry. Did I get it? Yes. That's it. No discussion. Then switch. Take like 10 seconds. Yeah, one person's just going to say, I feel frustrated, and the receiver says, you feel frustrated. Did I get it? Yes. And switch.
I feel energizing. I feel energized.
You just have to switch the pronouns. If it's I feel energized, then you mirror back you feel energized. I didn't really have time to explain it very well. Excellent. This is the teeniest, tiniest little crumb of imago dialogue I could give you today. But let me just tell you that dialogue has more steps, but the main step is dittoing. That is the main step. So you need more practice, but you can take this home and use it for the rest of your life. And all you have to do is say, are you willing to ditto me? And have a conversation, but instead of a regular conversation, every time you say, like a sentence at a time, the person repeats back what you said. And it alone has been transformational in many couples. I am happy to answer questions about imago dialogue or any of these processes, not only today, but to anyone in this room. If you want to call me or email me, I would be happy to take time on the phone with anyone in this room today and answer any questions you have about the applications and doing this process. But moving right along. Just remember that the step is to pinpoint your perceptions, operate on your opinions, and then decide if you're going to dialogue or use discretion. That is the lickety-split version of the pod method. And I want to tell you that I know we're all familiar with the idea that therapists and healers get into the business to heal ourselves, right? So what does that say about a relationship therapist's relationships? Well, I was a mess, too. And I know these steps work because I had to use them to survive. And about 3 years ago, I was still at it, desperately trying to save my marriage from the despair and the isolation that were triggered frequently. And there's one night in particular that was a pivotal moment in my life, which ironically was after coming home from giving a monthly event that my ex and I used to give called the Relationship Miracle. And we had come home, the babysitter was relieved. I could tell on her face that she could tell something was wrong. It's embarrassing. My husband was lying on the couch in agony, in despair. These events were a live imago dialogue between himself and me about a real issue in our relationship, unrehearsed, in front of a live audience. To keep things safe, we would decide beforehand only on the general topic, and we had an agreement always to never drop a bomb and blindside the other with something that we agreed was not for public viewing. But even with these safety precautions, he sometimes would not be able to predict what would trigger him afterwards. I'm an open book. I'll pretty much talk about almost anything live on camera, but he's different. And his triggers stem from things we both understand that were very difficult in his childhood. We all have our stuff. But when he would get triggered, he would go to a place that I couldn't snap him out of. And I would get all caught up in wanting to snap him out of it and do imago dialogue and fix it and heal ourselves and heal our relationship so we can go out into the world and heal all the pain of the world. Codependency is so not a joke, it's not even funny, right? I mean, if you're gonna, be codependent, you might as well go for all the pain in the world, right? Get the most bang you can for your buck. I was really driven to right all the wrongs of my childhood, to right all the wrongs of the pain of my parents' marriage, all the pain that they had, all their hostility, everything. And it made my denial a little intense. And it made me keep trying to force something when it wasn't going to work. So this night, I needed some emotional distance because his agony was too much for me to bear. I went upstairs, closed the door, and picked up a book I was halfway through. Journey of the Heart by John Wellwood. Now, I've read a lot of books on relationships, but this is one of the best books I've ever read. And it just so happens, miraculously, that I was right on the part about separating your thoughts from your feelings. Now, this was not a new concept to me. We do this in Imago all the time. We say, the story I'm telling myself about that is. But there was something about the way John Wellwood put it, and I was ripe for his lesson. I followed the instructions in the book. I even said my feelings out loud, and through my bitter tears, started naming them. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel dark. I feel despair. Once I got rolling, it was no problem. I had a litany of awful suffering feelings that I was having. My opinions, what he called the story or the narrative, he's ruining my life. He always will ruin my life. I'm stuck in misery forever. Pretty bad. I kept on doing this process, and suddenly he knocks on the door. He wants to talk. I'm not ready. I'm having an epiphany. I'm having a life-changing moment. No, I need to be alone. I'm doing my work. He retreats without opening the door. I continue to do this process, and something happens. I have a physiological experience of the image of him and his misery and the story of my misery and all of the pain involved in everything about us starts receding, fading. I'm talking like disappearing, like in a movie. Gone. And I'm left alone with myself and my feelings. Painful, but simpler, cleaner. I could work with this. Now I'm grounded, and I'm ready to share. I invite him to talk, and I only share that I let my negative story, my suffering opinions of him and us go. Really let them go. And I did this by naming my feelings. And that by doing that, they have subsided, and I am at peace. And that's all I share. We talk, he's relieved, and we decide not to do the event anymore. Duh. And I'm sad. I don't get what I want, but it's a pivotal point in my life, and it helps me let go of needing to make him my enemy, and it helps me let go of my marriage, which I was also trying to force. And I still use these tools today in that relationship, and I'm able to say that it's helping me experience the most difficult in my life ever relationship as something that is handleable by me and works. The relationship miracle after all. So I hope you're willing to use these steps in your life. I want to remind you that everyone can relate to communication breakdowns and communication problems in their life, and that we don't have to suffer as much as we do in relationships, and that following a simple method can really relieve most discomforts in most relationships. The pod method is a great start, and these steps work. So the next time something happens, and there will be a next time, that you feel icked by somebody, bothered by something, feel that a boundary was crossed, I hope you'll remember to get into the pod. Thank you.